My name is Samuel Hayes. I'm 29 years old, and on the day my grandfather's will was read, my parents sat across a long polished table, looked me dead in the eye, and tried to erase me like I had never belonged to them at all. The conference room felt colder than it should have. I kept my hands clasped together on the surface of the table, the muscles in my forearms tight, knuckles pale. Across from me, my sister lounged back in her designer dress, legs crossed, already wearing the smug look of someone who believed the day was hers. The lawyer cleared his throat, opened a folder, and my mother leaned forward with a sugary smile I'd seen her use on strangers she wanted to impress. Her voice floated across the room, light and celebratory. When she announced that my sister would be receiving $15 million from my grandfather's estate, my father slid a stack of prepared documents toward her. Almost ceremonially, people around the table murmured, "Congratulations," as if the whole scene were some polished ending of a family fairy tale. Then he turned to me. No folder, no envelope, not even a cheap pin pushed my way. Just a shrug. "Your sister gets $15 million. As for you, Sam, you can earn your own. Your grandfather didn't want you to have anything." My mother nodded without hesitation. "He said he was done with you. You chose your career over family. This is what he wanted." I didn't argue, didn't look up, didn't give them the smallest crack to slip their satisfaction into. I pressed my fingertips harder into the wood grain, let the noise of the room blur, and kept breathing as they rewrote the man I'd known my whole life into someone who supposedly wanted me cut out. And that's when the chair beside me scraped back. My grandfather's attorney, Daniel Park, stood slowly, smoothing the front of his jacket while the room quieted. His voice was calm when he said there was a second document, sealed and hidden, one my parents had never been allowed to see. A document meant to be opened only when every immediate family member was present, especially me. My mother's face dropped a shade. My father forced a laugh, the kind meant to dismiss something before it grew teeth. "There's no second document," he said. "Dad must have been confused near the end. There's no need to read anything else." Daniel didn't acknowledge him. He slipped a thick sealed envelope from his briefcase and set it on the table like he was placing a demolition charge. "Mr. Arthur Hayes gave me explicit instructions," he said. "This codicil was to remain confidential from everyone, including his son, until this exact moment." My mother's hands tightened around the arms of her chair. My father blinked rapidly. Already calculating, already scrambling. Daniel broke the seal. My pulse hammered in my ears hard enough that the first few lines barely registered. But then the words cut cleanly through the silence. "To my grandson, Samuel Hayes. I leave full controlling interest in HarborMind Analytics." The room stilled. Even my sister froze. My father's voice cracked first. "That's impossible," he said. "Dad didn't build a tech company. He could barely use his phone." Daniel lifted his eyes and looked directly at him. He learned. He sought outside expertise. And he kept every part of the company in his name alone. His choice was deliberate. My mother leaned forward, voice sharp enough to slice. He wasn't in his right mind. He was old. He was confused. Daniel's expression didn't shift. "That, too, is addressed here." And just like that, something heavy, electric, dangerous settled into the room. Because if this was only the beginning of what my grandfather had kept hidden from them, what else was about to surface that they couldn't talk their way out of? Daniel didn't rush. He let the tension settle into the wood of the table, into the backs of the chairs, into the way my parents' eyes darted between each other, like swimmers realizing the tide had pulled them too far out. He kept reading. The words came steady, his tone level, but every sentence drove a wedge deeper into the version of events my parents had been selling for years. "I am fully aware," Daniel read, "that Mark and Linda have kept my grandson, Samuel, away from me, changing plans, telling me he is too busy, telling him I am too tired or confused to see him." My mother's breath caught. She tried to hide it behind a stiff swallow. My father straightened in his chair, desperate to look composed. Daniel continued, "I do not believe this. I have watched messages disappear. I have had calls redirected. I have seen Chloe placed in front of me for photos and videos, while I'm told Sam doesn't care. My jaw tightened, but I didn't speak. I kept my eyes on the table. Controlled. Quiet because men like me don't explode, we absorb. And we wait for the next blow to land. Daniel's voice stayed smooth. I have also noticed substantial transfers from my joint accounts into personal cards and accounts controlled by Mark and Linda. These were never discussed with me. My mother shot up so fast her chair shrieked. That is a lie. She snapped. She jabbed a finger across the table toward me like I'd written the codicil myself. We took care of him. We did everything for him. While she cut herself off. But the blame hung there. My father lifted a hand to calm her. But his eyes were darting calculating angles. Trying to read the room. Dad was under pressure when he wrote that. He said evenly. He had episodes. Paranoia. You know how the elderly get confused. Suspicious. Daniel didn't blink. This codicil was drafted and signed in my office. With medical clearance affirming full competency. That cracked something. Not in me but in them. Chloe clutched her folder like it was a life jacket, and she just realized she was on a sinking ship. So what she burst out. He gives Sam some random company and makes us look like thieves. I was the one helping him. I was there. Her voice wavered. For the first time, she didn't sound entitled. She sounded scared. I still said nothing. I wasn't here to comfort or condemn her. I wanted the truth. Stripped bare. And then Daniel said it, the line that shifted everything in the room. Arthur anticipated resistance. He left further instructions and additional evidence. My father's facade slipped. The mask cracked around his eyes. My mother leaned close to him, whispering urgently, "Mark, do something. You can't let this stand." He didn't have an answer this time. That was when the first real crack appeared. Not in their marriage. Not in their defenses. But in the story they'd been curating for years, the one where I was the distant grandson. The selfish one who stopped showing up. Daniel placed the remaining pages down and folded his hands. "Mr. Hayes," he said, looking straight at my father. "Your father believed Samuel was being deliberately isolated." Silence enveloped the room. My mother's breathing hitched. Chloe's face crumpled in confusion. My father looked like he'd swallowed something too sharp. Daniel continued. "There is more to present, including documentation, financial logs, and recordings. But before we proceed, Mr. Hayes wished the family to hear this codicil together." He let that hang. Heavy. Final. No more secrecy. He added quietly. My mother's voice cracked into a whisper. "This isn't fair." It was the first honest thing she'd said all day, but she wasn't talking about fairness. She was talking about losing control. I finally lifted my head. Not to challenge. Not to accuse. Just to look at the pieces shifting in front of me, pieces I'd been kept away from. Pieces that never added up until now. "Daniel," I said, my voice low. Steady. "Is there anything else he asked you to say at this point?" He met my eyes, a brief flash of something like respect. "Yes," he replied. "Your grandfather wanted you to hear this next part before any further evidence was shown." He reached into his briefcase again. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from knowing something real was finally coming. Something they couldn't spin. Something they couldn't bury. Something that would make everything snap into focus. Because if my grandfather planned for this moment, what did he leave behind that none of them were prepared to face? Daniel didn't reach for another envelope. Not yet. Instead, he placed a small black flash drive on the table quietly, deliberately letting the weight of it settle in the room before anyone could speak. My mother inhaled sharply, like she recognized the shape of the threat before he even named it. "This," Daniel said, tapping the drive once with his finger, "contains a video your grandfather recorded when he finalized this codicil." My father leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "Absolutely not." Then he snapped. "We're not playing into whatever conspiracy you and he came up with." Dad barely knew. He knew exactly what he was doing. Daniel replied. His tone didn't rise, but it hit harder than shouting. "He asked for this recording because he anticipated both of you would challenge his state of mind. My mother's face drained. She shook her head quickly. You can't show that. That's private. He wouldn't have wanted. He instructed me to show it specifically if you allege confusion, coercion, or diminished capacity. Her jaw locked. My father froze. Chloe looked between them, mascara already smudging under her eyes. Daniel opened a slim laptop brought by the paralegal. The screen glowed to life. My mother lunged forward. Turn it off, she ordered, voice sharp and trembling. You're not dragging our family into some spectacle. Daniel didn't look at her. He clicked play. The first frame punched the air out of the room. My grandfather, older, thinner, but unmistakably present, sat in the exact same conference room we were in now. His hands were folded, his back straight, his eyes clear. A younger Daniel, off camera, spoke. State your name and purpose for the record. My name is Arthur Hayes, he said. His voice wasn't frail. It wasn't confused. It was steady, intent. And I'm here because I've learned my trust has been used without my consent. My father's shoulders stiffened. On screen, Grandpa continued. I have seen money leave my accounts, large sums used for travel, vehicles, brand deals, none of which I approved. My mother's breath hitched. She gripped the sides of her chair as if bracing for impact. When I ask questions, Arthur went on, I am told I'm confused. I am told I already agreed. But I know what confusion feels like. And this isn't it. My father exploded. He was tired. You pushed him into this. Daniel paused the video with a slow, almost pitying shake of his head. Mr. Hayes, your father requested the session. He also requested his physician examine him that morning. The competency certification is signed and filed. He pressed play again. Grandpa leaned slightly forward on the screen. I love all my grandchildren, he said. But Sam understands how I think. He sees systems. He built something years ago that helped my store. And when someone builds something useful, you invest in them. I kept my expression still. Inside, something tightened: anger, grief, relief blended into a silent storm. Grandpa wasn't finished. I have also watched as Chloe is placed in front of me for social media. I know what a camera looks like. I was not confused. I did not agree to be used for someone's brand. Chloe's face crumpled. She opened her mouth, shut it, looked at the table. I have seen Sam attempt to visit and be turned away. Grandpa added. I've seen emails disappear, calls intercepted. My mother stood abruptly, almost knocking her chair over. That's enough, she shouted. He wasn't well. He didn't know what he was saying. Daniel rewound 3 seconds and let the next line cut her off. I am fully competent, Arthur said firmly. And I want Harbormine to go to Sam because he won't waste it. He'll build something meaningful. Silence. Heavy. Punishing. The video ended. The screen went black. My father tried again, but weaker this time. A jury won't believe a staged clip. They'll see how much we did for him. Daniel closed the laptop with a muted click. If this goes to court, he said evenly, the video becomes public record. So do the financial logs showing withdrawals tied to Chloe's sponsored trips and your household expenditures. And so does every statement your father made regarding isolation and manipulation. A vein in my father's temple pulsed. This is ridiculous, he muttered. We cared for him. We managed things because he couldn't. Daniel slid a supplemental folder across the table. The forensic review suggests otherwise. My mother didn't touch it. Her hands were trembling too hard. Chloe finally spoke. Voice small. Mom, Dad, did you know about the money about all of this? My mother shut her eyes like the question itself was an insult. My father didn't answer at all. Daniel folded his hands. Your grandfather understood that once this information surfaced, the narrative would shift. He glanced between them. You spent years shaping a particular story about Samuel. That he was distant, uninterested, absent. He turned to me. Arthur believed the opposite. He believed Samuel was pushed out. My mother snapped her eyes open. You don't know what we dealt with. You don't know how hard it was keeping everything together while he fell apart. Daniel didn't raise his voice. I know what a withdrawal authorization form looks like. I also know when a signature has been photocopied and reused. My parents froze. Dead still. No one breathed. Daniel leaned back slightly. Your father anticipated this dispute, he said. He left more evidence than this. Documents, logs, screenshots. Enough to make your objections extremely difficult to maintain in a legal setting. My mother whispered, "This can't be happening." But it was. And watching them unravel, piece by piece, not through my anger, not through any outburst, but through the truth, something inside me settled. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just clarity, because for the first time, the story they told about me wasn't the only version in the room. And it wasn't the one with power anymore. When Daniel said my grandfather had seen his messages disappear, something in my mind split open like a locked room, finally forced wide. And suddenly I wasn't in that conference room anymore. I was a kid again, standing under the heavy Savannah sun, with sweat sticking my shirt to my back, watching my family perform a version of themselves that never included me. I remembered being 14, standing on our front porch, clutching a flyer for a summer coding camp at the community college. Nothing fancy. No overnight dorms or glossy brochures. Just 3 weeks of cheap computers, donated snacks, and local instructors teaching the basics. It felt like a big deal to me. It felt like a door. Chloe was in the driveway twirling in a new dance costume, glitter catching the sunlight like a spotlight designed just for her. My mother held her phone up, framing the perfect shot, yelling, "Give me a spin." Baby followers love this. My dad was hauling suitcases into the trunk for their weekend trip to Orlando. Another dance competition. Another expensive hotel. Another video montage for their social feeds about supporting Chloe's journey. I stepped forward, held out the camp flyer. "Mom, this is what I was telling you about. The program starts next month," and she didn't even stop recording. She skimmed the flyer like it was a parking ticket. "We already said that thing is too expensive," she muttered. "Maybe next year. Besides, Sam, you spend enough time on that computer. Go outside or something." She shoved the flyer back into my hand and angled the camera toward Chloe again. I stood there with the paper crumpling in my fist while they drove off to another weekend of cheering her on. And I told myself it didn't matter. But it always did. School wasn't much different. At parent-teacher conferences, instructors lit up when they saw Chloe's name. "She has such presence," they'd say. "So expressive. So confident." Then they'd get to me. "Samuel is very bright, but quiet. Too quiet. He needs to participate more. He hides behind his projects." My mother would sigh, shaking her head with a laugh. "He'd marry that laptop, if he could." My dad would chuckle. "We're working on getting him out of his shell." It always sounded like I was a problem they were trying to fix. Chloe was energy. Stage lights. Applause. I was a shadow in the back. A kid who talked too little, thought too much, and asked questions no one wanted to answer. At least, no one except my grandfather. Arthur Hayes showed up in his old pickup truck one humid afternoon, wearing his plaid shirt, the same one he used to fix up the hardware store shelves. He told me he had something for me in the passenger seat. When he handed it to me, my breath caught. A beat-up laptop. Keys faded. Scratches on the case. No brand name visible. It was on sale at a closing office store. He said with that soft grin of his, "They say the processor's old. I say it's got experience." He set it on the kitchen table like it was made of gold. My mother frowned at it before returning to her phone. More screen time. Great. Grandpa ignored her completely. "You and I," he said, tapping the lid. "We're going to figure this thing out." And we did. Not in some perfect movie montage way. Half the time the laptop froze or buzzed like it was trying to take off. But he sat with me anyway, reading chapters from books he barely understood. Intro to Python. Data for small businesses. Excel for dummies. He thought that last one was hilarious. He'd read a paragraph, then ask, "So in English, Sammy, how does this help someone running a store like mine?" I'd explain it the best I could. He'd squint like he was decoding alien language, then smile. Now that's useful. He made me feel like the way my brain worked wasn't strange, or wrong, or something that needed correcting. It was just mine, and worth something. One night that year, Chloe was trying on outfits, getting ready for another video. Sequins everywhere. My mom zipping one costume, telling her how incredible she looked. Like always, I walked in holding a printout, my first attempt at real analysis. A little chart I made showing how Grandpa could save money by ordering certain items monthly instead of weekly. I handed it to my dad. Look, if he changes this schedule, he could save around $800 a year on nails and screws alone. He looked at it for half a second. That's nice, Sam. But you can't run a business off made-up math from a teenager. Chloe snorted. Nerd alert. My dad patted her shoulder on the way out. I held on to that sheet longer than I should have, trying not to let the words sink in. But then Grandpa looked at it. He took me to the store the next day, walked me down aisles of paint cans and power tools, and stood there with me in the fluorescent glow. Show me again, he said. We mapped it out right there between buckets of drywall mud and lawnmowers. He listened. He asked real questions. He treated me like someone worth listening to. Before we left, he ruffled my hair the way he used to when I was a kid. You see patterns the rest of us miss. Sammy, don't forget that. No one had ever said that to me. When I was 17, I entered a local hackathon. I built a primitive dashboard using store data, seasonal demand, slow-moving items, reorder timing, nothing polished, just something that worked. My parents promised they'd be there, said they were proud. They didn't show. They sent a photo instead. Chloe at the mall, wearing new shoes. Sorry, Sam. Traffic was crazy. We'll celebrate later. We never did. But Grandpa came. Not just came, he cheered louder than anyone. When they announced I'd won, he hugged me so hard, I lost my breath. You built something real, he told me. If you can help one store, you can help 10. If you can help 10, you can help 100. Then he dragged me to the judges, asking them questions like, he was my agent. Could this warn a guy when he's running low on concrete mix? What about paint? Can it do that? They laughed, but they listened. And for a moment, I felt like someone who had a future. The older I got, the more obvious the divide became. Chloe's milestones came with cake, balloons, celebratory dinners. Mine came with a distracted, nice job. Buddy tossed over his shoulder. My parents said I was too intense, too serious, too focused on things no one cared about. Chloe called me the ghost who lives upstairs. But Grandpa, he saw something else. He talked to me about ideas, real ones. What if there was a tool that told shops when to reorder? What if you could help a bakery know which cupcakes actually made money? He wasn't just humoring me anymore. He was planning, thinking like a man who had kept a business running through recessions and storms and years when nothing went right. He told me that small business owners needed someone on their side, someone who could give them the kind of tools only big companies had. And he said quietly, like a secret, you could be that someone. Sammy. I didn't believe him then, but he believed in me enough for both of us. Years later, sitting in that conference room with Daniel reading my grandfather's words out loud, words about messages disappearing, calls redirected, I finally understood the pattern. All those times I tried to visit, and my parents said he was tired, sick, sleeping. All those emails that went unanswered. The Christmas Eve I'd driven home unannounced and found myself turned away in the driveway with the excuse that Grandpa was at some facility, only to learn weeks later he'd been at home the entire time. Their version of events had never matched reality. It wasn't Grandpa who didn't want me. It was them. They controlled access, controlled narrative, controlled the idea of who I was supposed to be. To them, Chloe was the star, the brand, the investment. I was the kid who didn't fit the picture. So they edited me out. Quietly, completely, efficiently. And they would have kept doing it until the end if Grandpa hadn't left a record that couldn't be deleted, rewritten, or intercepted. As Daniel paused between pages, letting my parents squirm. The memories kept rolling in one scene, bleeding into the next. A lifetime of being the overlooked son, finally making sense. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just favoritism. It was strategy. Chloe was good for views. I wasn't. Grandpa saw value in the part of me they dismissed. They couldn't let that threaten their image. And suddenly I understood something I hadn't seen clearly until that very moment. Maybe Grandpa didn't build Harbormind in secret for me. Maybe he built it in secret because of them. Because he knew if he handed them access, they'd strip it to the bones and leave me with nothing but a polite pat on the back and a forced smile for the camera. He saw the storm coming long before I ever did. And he made a plan. A plan that started with a beat-up laptop on a kitchen table and ended with a sealed codicil that turned the entire room against itself. When the memories faded and the conference room snapped back into focus, everyone was staring at me. My mother defensive, my father stone-faced, Chloe shaking, Daniel patient. And for the first time in my life, I felt something settle inside my chest, not anger, not triumph, just truth. Unavoidable, undeniable, finally visible. Because everything they tried to erase, my grandfather had saved. Word for word, proof for proof, year after year. And now it was all on the table. Literally. Daniel didn't rush into the next step. He let the tension settle. Like he understood that once the next piece came out, nothing in that room would ever go back to the way it was. He reached calmly into his briefcase again. They pulled out a second folder thicker than the first and placed it between us. This, he said quietly, is the documentation your grandfather instructed me to present only if his codicil was challenged. My father stiffened. My mother's fingers curled around the arm of her chair. Chloe swallowed hard. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were spreadsheets, email logs, printed screenshots, bank statements. But he didn't slide it to me. He slid it toward my parents. The judge will receive a digital copy, he said. But Arthur wanted you to see the physical one first. My mother hesitated before touching it, as if the paper might burn her. My father opened the first page. He froze up. His eyes darted across the page in small jerks. Was the way a man reads something he already knows, but hoped no one else would ever see. These are unauthorized transfers, Daniel explained. From Arthur's joint accounts. Your names appear on the routing instructions. My father's mouth tightened, like he was biting down on a lie that suddenly tasted bitter. That's not proof of anything, he said. Dad approved. He addressed that as well. Daniel interjected. Audio recordings. He requested I keep copies. My mother looked up sharply. Panic flashing. Recordings. He recorded us. Daniel didn't answer the outrage. He simply opened a slim black case, removed a small digital recorder, and placed it on the table. I saw my father's throat move one hard swallow. Daniel pressed play. My grandfather's voice filled the room. Older, slower, but sharp. Mark, I don't recognize this withdrawal. Why is there a charge for airline tickets here? My father's voice followed light, casual, dismissive in a way that made my jaw tense. You already approved that. Dad. No. Grandpa said. No. I didn't. You did. My father insisted. You must have forgotten. Then my mother's voice chimed in. Falsely sweet. Arthur. It's okay. You're tired. Let us handle the details. Grandpa's voice hardened. I'm not tired. I'm asking a question. The recording ended. The silence that followed wasn't soft. It was brutal. My father leaned forward, face reddening. You can't use manipulated audio as proof. It's time-stamped. Daniel said. Verified. Stored in my office. And your father had the same files backed up offsite. My mother closed her eyes, shaking her head like she could undo the last 10 minutes by refusing to look at them. Daniel reached again into the folder and pulled out a set of blown-up images. Emails. Familiar email addresses. Mine among them. These are Sophia. He corrected himself instantly. Samuel's messages to Arthur. Dozens over the past 10 years. All marked as opened. All unanswered. He tapped the top of the page. Opened from your devices. not Arthur's. My father looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. My mother's voice came out small, but still defensive. We were protecting him. He didn't need stress. He didn't need isolation. Daniel said sharply. It was the first time his tone cut. He lifted another sheet. These are Arthur's call logs. Calls routed to voicemail when marked as incoming from Samuel's number. Chloe stared at the page as if seeing it all for the first time. He tried to call that many times, she whispered. No one answered. The truth was sitting right in front of her. My mother finally snapped. This is a smear campaign. You're twisting innocent things into something evil. We were caretakers. You have no idea how hard Daniel didn't flinch. Arthur knew you'd try to reframe it. That's why he recorded the day you turned Samuel away. My breath stopped. My father stammered. That was he showed up unannounced. It wasn't a good time. Daniel nodded to the paralegal, who opened another laptop and played a short clip. It was taken from a doorbell camera. There I was 23 years old, holding a gift bag, exhausted from a last-minute Christmas flight, standing on the porch of the house I grew up in. My mother stepped outside, blocking the doorway. You can't come in. Sam, he's not well today. From inside the house, Grandpa's voice, clearer than I wished, called out faintly. Who's at the door? My mother shouted back. Just a delivery. My younger self stood there, stunned, hurt in a way I remembered too well. Then I left. The clip ended. My mother's face drained of color. You didn't hear him, she whispered. He wasn't himself. We were trying to. Daniel stacked the documents neatly. Your intentions are irrelevant, he said. Your actions are not. My father sat rigid, the hands clasped so tight his knuckles whitened. You're going to ruin our family name over misunderstandings. Daniel pushed the entire folder toward him. This, he said quietly, is what ruined your family name. He turned to me then, eyes steady. Arthur wanted Samuel to have harbor mind because he believed Sam could use it for what it was built for. Not for image, not for vanity, but for real people. My chest tightened, but I kept my expression still. I had spent years learning how to hide the parts of me that reacted. Daniel continued. Arthur made sure the controlling interest and all associated accounts are firewalled. They can't be claimed by anyone else. The court will uphold it. My father finally slumped back, the fight draining out of him. My mother stared at the stack of evidence, silent tears streaking her mascara. Chloe looked at me, not angry, not jealous, just lost. I didn't say anything, not because there weren't words, but because men like me don't need to speak just to fill the silence. The power had shifted, not with shouting, not with revenge, but with truth. My grandfather had left them nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to rewrite the narrative. The evidence was complete, irrefutable, final, and I sat there quietly, waiting, because I knew that from this moment on, the future didn't belong to their version of me anymore. It belonged to the man my grandfather believed I already was. The fight my parents promised never made it to a courtroom showdown with testimony, or tears, or dramatic cross-examination. Once Daniel filed the codicil, the video, and the financial logs, and their bluff collapsed under the weight of something they'd never planned on, facing evidence they couldn't charm, bully, or spin. There were meetings. Yes, confidential conferences where their attorney swaggered and loud, confident, shaking hands too hard, telling my parents that wills were flexible, that codicils could be negotiated, that probate court loved compromise. He walked out of the first disclosure meeting looking like he'd aged 10 years in 40 minutes. The court appointed a forensic accountant to review my grandfather's joint accounts. And once numbers replaced emotion, there was nowhere left to hide. Every transfer, every family expense, every swipe of a card tied to Chloe's brand or my parents' lifestyle unfolded in spreadsheets and tidy exhibits. The judge wasn't interested in Chloe's emotional videos holding Grandpa's hand. He wasn't interested in my parents' stories about sacrifice. He cared about the power of attorney my father used to move money without permission. He cared about timing. Transfers made days before luxury vacations. Withdrawals right before the purchase of a new SUV. Payments covering influencer trips Chloe claimed were sponsored. He cared about the missing emails, Grandpa's unanswered messages. My unanswered messages vanishing in patterns that lined up with my parents' devices. Not his. When their attorney attempted to argue that Arthur verbally approved everything, Daniel slid the laptop forward and let the judge watch the clip where my grandfather stared into the camera and said, "I am not confused." After that, there wasn't much left for anyone to argue. The medical evaluation confirmed Grandpa's mental clarity when he changed his will. The accountant's report laid out the misuse of funds in columns that didn't care about feelings or excuses. The court validated the codicil in full. HarborMind Analytics and all associated accounts were declared mine, exactly as Arthur intended. Then came the part my parents never anticipated. The judge ordered them to repay what they had taken from the joint accounts. Not estimates, not guesses. Exact amounts, plus penalties and interest. They didn't have it. My parents had been living like the money spigot would never stop flowing. To even begin repaying what they owed, they had to sell the house, the big one in Savannah with the white columns, the curated lawn, the place my mother used as a backdrop for holiday photos. They sold the 2 high-end cars parked prominently in the driveway, the same ones Chloe used as props in her day in my life videos. And it didn't take long for the fallout to spread through town. Savannah wasn't forgiving. Small towns rarely are. Neighbors who once complimented my mother's decor whispered about elder financial abuse at the grocery store. People who envied them now crossed the street to avoid conversation. My father was suspended from his job at the logistics company during the internal review. Suspension turned into termination for cause. No company wanted a CFO whose father's estate had become a public record of abuse and forgery. Chloe's downfall was different. Quieter at first, then loud everywhere else. Someone online dug up old videos of her with Grandpa. Clips where he looked distracted or uncomfortable. Screenshots surfaced, messages she'd sent to friends, bragging about being set for life once the will landed in her favor. Brands cut ties overnight. Reputational risk. Shift in strategy. Partnership concluded. Her follower count slid, then tumbled. Comments shifted from praise to accusations, one she couldn't delete fast enough. She posted a tearful apology video about misunderstandings. But without the trips, the clothes, the curated perfection, the algorithm left her behind. Meanwhile, I signed paperwork in a quiet courthouse room. Documents that formally severed every last legal tie between us. No shared accounts. No shared obligations. No emergency contacts. No way for them to reach into my life ever again. Daniel slid over the final form. "After you sign this," he said, "they have no claim. Not today. Not 10 years from now." My hand hovered for a second, not from hesitation, but from the weight of closing a door I'd spent years pressing myself against. Then I signed. The pen didn't shake. And for the first time in my life, their disappointment had no power, no leverage, no access, just distance. A clean, legal distance, the kind you don't come back from. I didn't walk out of that courthouse feeling triumphant. No adrenaline, no victory high, just a quiet, steady calm, like someone had finally shut off an engine that had been running in the back of my mind for years. I moved into a modest apartment in Atlanta. A place with thin walls, stubborn windows, and a view of a parking lot instead of a skyline. But it was mine, paid for with my work, not theirs. No strings, no emotional debts I'd be expected to repay later. HarborMind's team small, but real, was renting 2 floors in a freshly painted building that still smelled of new carpet. 5 engineers, 3 analysts, a handful of support staff. People who believed in the platform, not because my family name was attached to it, but because the work mattered. I showed up early every morning, the way Grandpa used to open his store before sunrise. Unlocked the office, turned on the lights, brewed the first pot of coffee. There was something grounding about the routine, simple, unglamorous, honest. A few weeks later, Grandma Ruth called. She didn't want to stay in the Savannah house while it was being gutted for sale. Said it felt like a museum exhibit of a life she didn't recognize anymore. So she packed a couple of suitcases, her photo albums, and the framed picture of her and Arthur standing outside the hardware store on opening day. She left behind everything else. She moved into my apartment without ceremony. No big conversation. She just hung her coat on the hook by the door and said, "Where do you want the rocking chair?" Every evening we'd sit on the balcony, with takeout containers balanced on our knees. The Atlanta skyline, blinking in the distance. Sometimes she talked about Arthur's stories I'd never heard from anyone else. Other nights she said nothing at all. Just rocked gently, knitting in the warm breeze. Silence with her didn't feel empty. It felt earned. My parents left town not long after the house sold. They didn't call, didn't text. From the small updates that filtered through distant relatives, I heard they'd taken a cheap rental in Nevada. No more charity galas. No club memberships. No curated holiday cards. They were living quietly. Maybe for the first time in their lives. And for the first time in mine. The quiet didn't hurt. Chloe reached out the second year after the will reading. A long email. No demands. No dramatic apology. Just an honest account of what her life had become working at a small marketing agency. Volunteering at a community center. Teaching girls how to film content without losing themselves to it. She didn't justify the past. She didn't ask for absolution. She just wanted to talk. So we did. Slowly. Awkwardly. Two adults trying to sift through years of noise. We weren't close. Not yet. But the door wasn't bolted shut anymore. Meanwhile, Harbormind grew. One client. Then 5. Then 50. A hardware store that avoided bankruptcy because of our forecasting tool. A bakery that survived a slow season because our dashboard showed which items were draining profit. Every success felt like a small echo of something Grandpa once said, "Help the little guys." In the quiet moments, late nights in the office, early mornings before the team arrived, I'd think about the kid I used to be. The one ignored at the kitchen table. Told to stop obsessing over numbers no one cared about. He wouldn't have believed where he ended up. But I didn't build this life to prove my parents wrong. I built it because I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. Freedom wasn't loud. It was steady. Simple. Mine. People like to say success is the best revenge. Maybe that's true for some. But standing on the other side of everything, court filings, severed ties, a company rebuilt from the ground up, I realized something quieter. Something heavier. Revenge wasn't the point. Freedom was. If you're a man who grew up being dismissed, underestimated, or treated like background noise in your own family, you learn early how to hold things in. You tighten your jaw. You get quieter. You carry your pain inside because showing it feels like handing someone a weapon. But here's the truth nobody told me when I was young. Being overlooked doesn't mean you lack value. Being ignored doesn't mean you aren't capable. Being pushed aside doesn't mean you won't matter. Some people can only measure worth in applause, attention, or control. If you don't fit the role they wrote for you, they'll make you feel small enough to disappear. Don't disappear. Find the one-person friend, mentor, teacher, grandfather who sees you without trying to edit you. Let their belief in you be the seed. Then build your future brick by brick. Quietly, steadily, without asking anyone for permission. You don't have to prove anything to the people who refuse to see you. You don't have to win their approval. You don't need them to finally say you were enough. The win is this: a life they can't take from you, a purpose they can't bury, a version of yourself they no longer get to rewrite. If you've ever been the Sam in your family, the overlooked son, the easy one to blame, the one who didn't fit, you deserve more than survival. You deserve a life built on your terms. And you can build it. This story is a fictionalized narrative created solely for entertainment and discussion. Names, events, and details have been altered or invented for privacy and storytelling. Any resemblance to real people or real situations is purely coincidental and not intended as guidance.